Nightcast. Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth brings you the current news from the world today and how it relates to Bible prophecy. Understanding the end-time events leading to the peaceful world tomorrow. Ladies and gentlemen, Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth.
Good evening, friends, and welcome to this Nightcast edition for November 10, 2014. Our opening story tonight, we're going to roll in the background some lava flow from the Kilauea volcano in Hawaii that's slowly creeping towards the village of Pahoa. And officials have said the first house has been hit. Many residents of the Big Island village have already evacuated their homes as they have been watching the slow-moving flow since it first emerged from the vent in June. And that's one of our states for the United States, the modern-day descendants of Manasseh, one of the two sons of Joseph. And next in the news, friends, I'm going to move through the news kind of swiftly tonight. We've got a story from China. And I'm going here next and showing you the big hoopla that's going on there for delegates arriving at the Apec summit. And in fact, I'm going to go ahead and roll that because there's no commentary with this video, just the big fanfare in the background, or in the foreground now. As the delegates arrive, delegates arriving at the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation APEC summit in Beijing were treated to an illuminated red carpet and crowds of dancers. Inside, the summit leaders of China and Japan met for formal talks after more than 2 years of tensions over a territorial dispute. In his speech, U.S. President Barack Obama announced changes to visa arrangements with China. Among other delegates attending the evening function was Australian Prime Minister Tony Abbott. Multiple entry short-term visas for businessmen and tourists will be extended to 10 years, up from 1 year. How you like that one? And what approval did United States President Barack Obama secure from Congress or the people of the United States for extending those visas from 1 year to 10 years for businessmen and tourists traveling to the United States? Well, just a little bit more we're seeing of that executive power being used by the President of the United States, kind of a dictator type of leadership he's been exhibiting, and as he plans to exhibit with immigration, as the Republicans are trying to wrestle with the president about. But he's showing himself to be rather independent. We'll be watching that as we go. It could have some negative impact on the United States. But friends, really we keep emphasizing the fact that unless the majority of the country, of its citizens, are obeying God, we're really looking at the results produced from, as God explains it in Leviticus 26 and Deuteronomy 28, if you diligently hearken and obey the voice of the eternal God and keep his statutes and his commandments, he says, I'll give you all these wonderful blessings, including rain in due season, including making you the head, not the tail, including blessing you against your enemies, such that if you want to fight for yourselves and not have me defend you totally, well, 5 of you will chase 100. 100 of you will put 10,000 to flight. That's one of the promises God makes to the offspring of Abraham and Isaac, if you obey. On the other hand, if you don't obey, he says just the opposite of these blessings that he's promised. Just the opposite of those blessings will be the cursings upon the country. And he says, then after receiving those curses, just the opposite of the blessings, if you still don't obey, then 7 times more God will punish you, in hopes that you will begin to obey. Obedience very important to our eternal God, because the big thing that became the problem with Lucifer turned Satan the devil was his self-independent acting, becoming an enemy of God and disobedient to the way of God of love and worshiping God with God on top, who's a loving God. He doesn't want any more Satans in the family that he's creating. He wants sons who are obedient. And he's a loving creator, so it's not like, the obedience he's requiring is not something extremely burdensome. But amidst all the hoopla that's going on with the Apec summit in Beijing, I want you to see this next video that shows how human rights groups are calling on world leaders who are there in China to raise the issue of human rights in China during the Apec summit. Amnesty International says that 76 people have been detained in China in the past few weeks for supporting pro-democracy protests in Hong Kong. BBC reporter Martin Patience tried to visit the home of one activist, Hu Jia, in Beijing, but was turned away.
Well, China's quite happy to talk about the factories that it's closed down, the cars that it's pulled off the roads, but we're trying to come to the home of one of the dissidents. Now, according to human rights groups, dozens of dissidents have been locked up in the past few weeks. That was after they showed support for the demonstrations in Hong Kong. But as you can see here, we're surrounded by 2 men. Excuse me, who are you, sir? They're not letting us film. Why are we not allowed to film here?
这位先生的护照您也让他出示一下 Please show your passport, okay?
Well, this is as close as we can get. The police have kicked us out of the compound, and you can see Hu Jia standing at the window. Human rights groups are urging America to raise this issue at the Apec summit. There's currently 2 Nobel Peace Prize winners in China. One is President Obama, the other is the jailed Chinese dissident Liu Xiaobo. And the question is, will the president ask about the prisoner here and risk upsetting his host?
Now that's a good question, and CIA or whoever feeds information to the president, if you're listening, I hope you'll encourage him to ask that question. That'd be a good one. Let's see what happens. Friends, the next story, last story for tonight, we're going to do a short broadcast tonight. I've had to, if you watched live last night, you saw we had quite a few problems with our video player. You see we're running fine tonight. I'm using a totally different computer, a backup computer. It's actually not as good a computer as our main computer we normally play on, but we're having some problems software-wise and that operating system-wise in that computer. And so while we're working on that, I've switched over to our backup, and thankfully our backup is working fine. So those of you that prayed, I got the solution. Hey, go to your backup, Steve. Well, to do that, though, I had to take all of our shots that are wired to the main computer and spend a few hours rewiring those for the backup computer today. But we've set it up now so that we can go from backup computer to main computer by just throwing a button. So I won't have to redo all that next time, and I won't have to redo it when we go back to the main computer. I just throw the switch back to the main, and our shots are ready to go. Anyway, That's a problem on our end, but I'm just telling you about it because we didn't archive last night's program. If you watched it live, if you tuned in during our live stream time, you were able to see what we offered you last night, which was quite a program. And even without the video player always working, we had still shots I was able to show you. We showed, I was going to say, it's one you might want to go back to the archive and watch, but we didn't upload it to the archive because of the problems we had, and then some delays. I was going to edit those out and put it in the archive, but then I got sick after the program last night for about 3 or 4 hours. I had a stomach virus problem, and thanks to some of you who became aware of that and prayed for me, even some on the telephone prayed for me, for which I'm very appreciative. I felt like I was not going to live through that one last night unless I got some intervention, and thank you for the prayers, and I did get some intervention, and friends, I believe that God inspired the doing of this program, and yet I'm not the only one who could do it. Somebody else could take this seat. The initial host of this seat, who I helped from behind the cameras, I helped him put the program together during the day. I ran the cameras for him and all the equipment, was Robert Collins, a longtime 50-year minister in Alabama, going back to when the Birmingham congregation was first formed in the late 50s, early 60s, after Mr. Waterhouse, Gerald Waterhouse, and one other man came into town with him for a baptizing tour, and boom, had a set. They saw dozens of people and began the Birmingham congregation. And among that early congregation was Robert Collins, who Mr. Armstrong ordained into the ministry in the mid-60s, in 66, at a feast in Big Sandy, Texas. And before that, he had been ordained for a few years as a deacon in the local Birmingham congregation. And he was serving the lead minister quite well, and Mr. Armstrong said this man should be ordained in the ministry, and did so during the mid-60s at a feast, as I mentioned, in Big Sandy, Texas. And he served with every lead minister that was assigned to Birmingham and Alabama area, all the potential and new brethren that God called into the church. No matter who the lead man was, the second man was always Robert Collins. So many people in Alabama have, as in their history of coming into the Church of God, they have their first meeting with the lead minister and the second minister. That second minister was always Robert Collins. So just about everybody who came in the church in Alabama, their first visit included Robert Collins being with the other minister in their potential member visit. And oftentimes, Mr. Collins told me how not just one minister, but many of them just somehow gravitated to asking Mr. Collins, should this person that we just visited, should we invite them to attend services now or wait until we see this or that? And Mr. Collins would, whatever he suggested and whatever decision he made about it, the other minister went along with that. And so those of you from Alabama who were invited to church, that was run through Mr. Collins, and he decided whether you would come now or later. But also the point is that many, many people in Alabama, many brethren in Alabama know Mr. Collins because of his being along with a second minister, another minister, on the first visit that each of you in Alabama received when you were a potential member for the Church of God. All right, I'm going into some details that some of you who are not members of our church may not understand, but maybe just give you a little glimpse. But for those who are, I thought that might be some interesting information to pass along. And the main point of what I was just saying is this, is that Mr. Collins was the initial host of this program. He asked me to keep this going after he died. I wanted to stay behind that camera, friends, and I'd have somebody else host this program. I asked a number of ministers if they'd like to do it, and of course that would have required them coming here to Alabama or me going to wherever they were, but nobody came forward and said they wanted to do it. And after a lot of fasting and prayer, it came into my mind, Steve, you need to take the seat, even if it's on an interim basis. And now, as of tonight, if you want to call it an interim basis, this is my 490th evening to host this program since Mr. Collins died. And friends, I felt like I was going to die last night. That's how bad the stomach problem I had was. I didn't even want to live. I was having a problem breathing and throwing up, and I had not all, but I had many of the symptoms that are listed on the websites, health websites, for a certain ingredient that was in some coconut milk that I drank. And I don't know if I can say that word, but it's a word for an ingredient that is related to vitamin B12. I thought, hey, that should be fine. But after I got sick, I'm checking everything as to what could have caused the problem I had last night that brought me to near death. In fact, I even prayed and said, God, if you're through with me, if you have no further use for me, or if you're upset with me and you won't let me die, just bring me up in the first, and I'll lay down again and take me out of this suffering. It was horrible last night. But anyway, thankfully I got some relief. The minor constant throwing up I was doing after someone on the phone prayed with me turned into 4 major upheavals that once all that was out of me, I began to settle down. And of course I was exhausted because for hours I'd just been constantly throwing up. And but after got the bulk of it out in those 4 major events, I was able to lay down and get a good night's rest, and things settled down. My throat became sore and hard. My face was swollen. Maybe some of you who watched the live program last night noticed my face was a little swollen, and that is one of the symptoms of that ingredient that was in that coconut milk I bought, which was supposed to be all healthy stuff, but that cyan, however you say that word, it produces vitamin B12 they include in there, is a chemical substance, I found out when I looked it up. So I took two cartons of that coconut milk back to the store today. They gladly refunded me. I didn't even have to explain. I just took them back. They just said, hey, you want to exchange for more of those? I said, no, I want to get some plain milk, some of your organic, regular milk, and that's fine. In fact, they gave me the money back and I just paid for whatever else I got separately. But anyway, friend, you might want to check on the ingredients of what you're eating, because, man, wrong stuff can be devastating. Our bodies are pretty tough. We get away with eating a lot of junk we shouldn't. But friends, I got one more story that's very important, and I think the bottom line of what I was trying to say to you was, you might have had, if God hadn't intervened last night, you would either be having a new host for this program if God wanted it to continue, or it would just fizzle out to nothing, But so far, I've been asking God all along from the beginning. Mr. Collins and I would ask God to either build, if he was behind it, for him to build it. And if not, then slam the door closed on it. And every time we would fast and pray about that in earnest, something would happen that encouraged us and would tell us, hey, I'm behind this, and I am building it. We'd have our audience grow, small growth, little by little, and we would have things given to us by companies that are not in the habit of giving things away, like certain software, pro software that is sold for $1,000 was just given to us, offered to us. We didn't ask, it was offered to us. And certain other things, a audio compressor that we use here, a $4,000 audio compressor, was given to us by the company that makes it. And that was, again, after fasting and prayer, that God should, if you're not behind this, close the door. But if you are, build it and give us a little sign that you're with us. And then, boom, some of these things are offered to us. So I've been encouraged. you know, and it's not the only thing God may be doing, but it's something that serves brethren. When one brother in Alabama to us, I'm going to give him a salute, Ray Green, came to Mr. Collins and I and said, first of all, said to us, you know, even to the longtime minister who was over Ray for many years in Alabama, Ray just said right out, blank out right to him, you know, when Ray would be talking about what happened in world news, he says, "You guys aren't watching world news. Christ told us to watch." And after he went home, we said, you know, hey, he's right. We weren't aware of what he mentioned that's important, and we weren't watching. And we got to get rid of some of these bonanza videos and westerns. We're watching Mr. Collins and start digging into the news. Mr. Collins said, yes, we should. And we did. And then the idea came, hey, we already have the weekend live video stream we're doing. You know, Mr. Collins, you could get on camera every night and introduce stories, and we got a license from BBC to play the videos we play for you, and we started doing it. And little by little, some of you started watching us on a regular basis. And I listened to you. If, you know, I've been encouraged by some of you to, Steve, include more things from prophecy. So, okay, I colored up the chart that I used when my dad used to have outreach and would have me speak at those things, and they wanted to hear about Revelation. So I took that chart and I colored it up, you know, and emphasized the 6 seals from Revelation 6 that we used for watching stories. And so we'll point out sometimes in the evening what seal relates to a story that we're watching. And all right, I hope I'm not boring you to tears, but I thank you for the opportunity, friends, to just talk to you a little bit tonight, because last night was a crisis night for me. I wasn't sure I was going to be here this morning, and I wrote some of my friends and said, alive, very weak but alive, as I got out of bed this morning. Well, I wrote them from bed. I used my tablet and got online. And anyway, friends, I'm thankful to be here again with you. But there's a couple of people in Israel who are not with us any longer, including a 26-year-old Israeli woman who was stabbed to death in an attack in the West Bank hours after another knife attack not only wounded a soldier in Tel Aviv, as the headlines here say, but that soldier died. So there were 2 deaths related to stabbings in Tel Aviv today. The latest incident occurred occurred near a Jewish settlement. The assailant was shot by a security guard, thank God. A Palestinian from the West Bank city of Nablus has been arrested in connection with the attack in Tel Aviv. The stabbings come at a time of heightened tension between Israel and the Palestinians, a lot of that involving what's going on in Jerusalem around the Temple Mount. And we'll be covering more of that in the days and weeks ahead, because that tension is growing and there's more stories going to come out of that. Israeli police foreign press spokesman Mickey Rosenfeld told BBC a thorough investigation into the incident was underway.
The latest attack that took place in Judea and Samaria was at a bus stop, which is located relatively close to Jerusalem, just 20 miles outside of Jerusalem. What took place was a Palestinian terrorist stopped his vehicle at the junction. He fled out of his vehicle and stabbed 3 Israelis that were waiting to be picked up at the bus stop. Unfortunately, a 26-year-old woman was critically injured, and she passed away of her wounds in a Jerusalem hospital. And the further 2 Israelis that were at the bus stop were taken to hospital with stabbing wounds, light to moderate condition. That was just over an hour ago near Jerusalem.
And what has happened to the perpetrator?
The terrorist was shot at the scene by a private security guard that was in the area. He quickly responded after he saw what had taken place on the scene. And still, as we're talking now, the area has been closed off, and police, security guards and the IDF are at the scene. A thorough investigation into that incident is being looked into, whether the terrorist worked on his own or whether he was affiliated with any terrorist cell.
Okay, that's the latest on what's happened there in Israel with that, friends. There was one thing in that story that I'm going to comment on, and that is where the reporter said that one or the two people had passed away. And I'm going to share this with you, what Dr. Herman Hay, told us in a spokesman's club, or actually I should say ambassador club as they were called at Ambassador College. One evening when one of the spokesmen in his speech had mentioned someone passing away. And Dr. Hay corrected him and all of the club, and he said, when you say that someone has passed away, you are speaking in terms that the world uses for a tradition that is not found in the Bible. He says it represents a pagan idea of passing away. He says it would be better for you to just say that the person died or was killed, if like in this situation, and not use the terms passed away. And he explained that relates to a pagan tradition of the soul passing here or there. He says that doesn't happen. He said, now, what happens at death, the soul dies. And the soul being the body, it's put in the grave. And I know this is different than what some of you who watch this program may believe. You've been told that, at death, you either go to heaven right away or you go to hell or some purgatory intervenor, some stages of this or that in between. But God simply says the soul that sins, it dies, and that any other soul, once it's in the grave, it knows nothing. You're dead. And until the resurrection, else why would there need to be a theory, or not theory, but a truth, a teaching of the resurrection, if your quote-unquote soul, if you stayed alive and you went here or there immediately upon death? You wouldn't need to be resurrected from the dead, from death. But because when we die, and we need to be resurrected to be alive again. Now, the spirit in man it ascends to heaven, and God puts it in a file box or in a computer hard drive of the type of spiritual computer hard drive that he has, or however you want to think about it, friends, or however he actually does it. He doesn't give us all the details, but your spirit the spirit in man that records everything about you, including your hair color, your eye color, your height, your shape of your face, the shape of your cheeks and chin and elbows and fingers and toes and everything about you, your personality, and a memory of your entire life. In that spirit, it's preserved and ascends to whatever filing system God has in his throne, at his throne in heaven, to keep that until the resurrection, and that is utilized at the resurrection to bring you, if you died, to bring those who've died back in the form and shape they were at the time they died. Because, even if they come out of the grave where they were buried, if there wasn't some kind of tremendous miracle going on, you open up a grave, even with embalming, there's still a lot of decomposition that goes on. But the point of that is Dr. Hay told us, not only explained that to us, but he said, now that I've explained that to you, I want you to explain that to others. So, friends, I'm following that instruction, that teaching, that command, you might even say, in a way, that Dr. Hay gave those of us he taught that to share that information with you. And hopefully you might want to follow it too. You'll have to, I found myself, when I would say so-and-so passed away, I found myself used to doing that. I when somebody died, it's kind of like, you got to go through a mental change gears and say, they died or they were killed. and not passed away. All right, I'm being heavy with spiritual stuff tonight, friends, because I went through a heavy evening last night. Thankful to be here this Monday evening. That's it for tonight, friends. God willing, and the creek don't rise. We'll be back again tomorrow night, Tuesday night, with the day's current news related to the Bible and prophecy here on Nightcast. Thanks for joining me. Hope you'll be back with us mañana evening, tomorrow night. Until next time, friends, your host, Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth. Glad to be here. Glad you're here, and saying so long and good night, friends.
You have been watching Nightcast with Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth. Nightcast can be seen Sunday through Thursday nights here on cogtv.org. Tonight's program is also available anytime on demand in the cogtv.org video archive.